Welcome to Western Riverina Arts 2025 CASP workshop with Jason Richardson. I'm Anya Whitehead, Executive Director of Western Riverina Arts, and I would like to introduce and thank Jason Richardson for coming along and presenting this workshop on this CASP round.
And to begin, I would like to just explain that I have had a long association with Western Riverina Arts. Remember the first meetings where we got the proposal together to develop the Regional Arts Board, and through working in various capacities and being on the board, I've seen the potential for this country art support program and grant, and it's a really wonderful opportunity for local projects because there's so many activities that come under its scope. And once you get over a couple of small hurdles, it's a very accessible grant because of the Western Riverina Arts only servicing 4 council areas means that you've got a lot less competition for your application. So I've been on a couple of CASP assessment panels. I think it was in 2012 and 2013. There's probably a few things that have changed since then. And I've also been on assessment panels for the Burning Sea event that happens out at Matong. They have their own arts program, Artery Grants, which are worth looking into because they have one specifically for Riverina artists if you'd like to be involved in that activity. And more recently, I was on a Create New South Wales assessment panel. And the processes are interesting because the dynamic of the panel does see some differences in terms of like what people establish as what they're looking for on the day. But I think a well-written grant can go a long way, even if you're initially unsuccessful. It's one of those things where once you've got it in your drawer, you can draw it back out again and build on it in future opportunities as they arise. But let's talk a little bit briefly about what CASP is. And it's a government initiative to support the arts in regional areas. And it covers a range of artistic collaborations, exhibitions, performances, workshops, community arts activities. And the benefits really are that it is about seeing those public outcomes. So a key focus in your grant should be about how you can make it accessible and open to as wider part of the community as possible. And those elements of being able to bring someone to run a workshop in the region or to introduce a new skill, whether it's an outlying sort of artistic endeavour that's on the fringes, to really widen people's creative practice and help establish that the arts are for everybody and that they cover such a wide range of activities. And the accessibility of it, as I mentioned, is really great because it's the same pool of money across each of the regional arts boards. But in our area, we've only got the 4 council areas that are competing for it. And even then, the population numbers aren't as big as what you'd see, say, in Eastern Riverina Arts, where they've got almost a dozen different councils and some as large as like Wagga Wagga, which is quite obviously the biggest inland city. No, it used to be the biggest inland city. These days, I think there's a couple of others that have overtaken. So looking into what you want to do with the arts grant is a big element. And it's always good, I think, to run your idea past a friend, to just articulate it, verbally to explain what you're hoping to achieve, because you'll get that initial feedback where people will give you a question mark about what the media might be or what the outcome is going to be. And it really does help clarify one's thoughts. So I think that's always the best thing, is to find your sounding board, your the person who gives you that sort of insight into your own life and behaviour, and just to share with them what you're hoping to achieve. There are a couple of little hurdles, as I mentioned, in terms of the application process. And one of those is that you need to be an incorporated association or be auspiced by an incorporated association to apply. And auspicing is where the incorporated association says, yep, we're going to take a hold of the funds for the artistic outcome and provide the public liability insurance to ensure that it's not going to really, it stops at anything happen. Should anything happen, anything coming back onto yourself as an organiser. it's a really important step that these processes are there to help manage risk in this day and age where it is such a dominant part of considerations for public activities. But also it just helps ensure that there's a certain amount of accountability. And for the assessment panels, it really does show that the feasibility of the project is there, that you've got the community support and the ability to deliver on what you're proposing. The other aspects of those considerations are that if you're working with children, you need a working with children check, which is a free process if you're a volunteer. And if you're a paid artist, then there's a small sum involved, which you might want to consider putting into the budget with those type of costs. The other aspect is if you're working with elements from the local First Nations culture, to show that you've got the support of that community to develop and present those in a public setting. You know, it really is an important consideration to recognise that in your application. As I mentioned, having your ideas run past a friend is a really good way to first get a clear idea yourself about what you're proposing. And the same thing happens when you start like filling in the application or get to the point of thinking it's nearly ready to send off, have someone look over it. Sometimes generating the words can be a challenge, and we all know that the artistic language can be rather verbose and hyperbolic at times. And so having simple language really does help ensure that the assessor is going to take in what you're proposing. And in this day and age, it really is remarkable that we've got these tools that really help with text generation. You know, I'm talking about your chat GPTs in terms of like feeding in that I'm hoping to run a workshop, you know, on digital arts, and it'll give you a scaffold by which you can work to tailor the material to suit your application. And by a scaffold, I mean, it really does give you a bare bones structure, and it's your job then to flesh it out with the local information that's relevant and demonstrates to the assessors that you're actually showing the needs of the local community and reflecting their interests. One of the other great things to consider about once you've found an incorporated association, and they can be any range, there's so many community groups that are incorporated, and if you reach out, like where I'm based in Leeton, there's an organisation called Leeton Connect that are working to help meet the needs of incorporated community groups, but also just to make them aware of each other. But they've got a pretty good list to show that there's over 100 sort of community organisations, say over Leetonshire. And, you know, once you reach out to them and ask them if they'll auspice a project, look to see if it aligns with their interests. And it also is a great activity for them because, you know, it helps them promote their interests in the community and also to, you know, reach an audience as much as yourself when you're developing an artistic project for the region. Those incorporated associations, I've worked with a number over the course of the grants that I've prepared, and usually it's often a new process for them. And so just helping them to understand that their contributions can be as small as providing, you know, the public liability certificate, but also a bank account details, and just handling the funds. And it often gives them a lot more of an understanding of what you're hoping to achieve, and it builds relationships over time. I think about some of the organisations that I've worked with, such as the Leeton Community Op Shop, and it was really great to get them on board to use like their windows facing the busy main street zebra crossing, and it really helped reach a bigger audience. And it was great to see that the people who work with them in various capacities were really interested in learning more through those projects as well. So again, it's a great way to actually start building an audience for your activities, to reach out to a community group to auspice an application. One of the other considerations, I guess, is you you often think it'll look more attractive if you put in a budget that's small, but sometimes when you're an assessor, it raises questions about the feasibility of the project if you look like you're not going to have enough funds to accomplish what you're hoping to achieve. And there's one area, furthermore, when you're developing the budget, which we'll get to in a bit more detail, but when you're developing the budget and reaching out to the community groups to offer them some funding for the auspicing of the grant. And I've usually found like something like 10 to 15% of the budget costs is reasonable, and the assessment panels look favourably on that because they see the wider reach of the project. And as I said, it's really great for the community groups because it helps them sort of keep doing what they do. And insurance costs, as we know, are always going up. So helping them continue their activities as much as developing your own is a great outcome. It's one of those win-win situations. The one other thing, I guess, about the auspicing bodies is that, like I said, you factor it into your overall budget, and the budgeting itself can look a bit daunting at times. I know we're so used to talking with words that working with numbers can often seem a bit opaque. And I think that opportunity to develop the budget allows you to see some of the other aspects of the project that could be explored or could be possibly addressed. And it is things like whether you've included some money for the documentation of the project, like which will help you in terms of showing the outcome, both to your initial audience immediately, but when we get to the acquittal. One key point with the budgeting is if it does start to seem like it's difficult, you just look at how you can simplify it, because at the end of the day, the assessors are also having to follow what you're proposing. So making sure that you make it easy for yourself is a benefit also for the next step of the process when the assessment panel get to it. Now, as I mentioned with documentation, one of the challenges, I think, as we move forward in the region is there's a lot less media around to use for promoting activities, but also when it comes to the acquittal to show that you delivered the project that you proposed. However, we've heard for many decades about the benefits of social media, and it's also an area where using I live in Narrandera, I live in Leetonshire type pages as a place to promote the project is also a great way to show that the project happened, because it's a record, and including those links and capturing them while you're doing the process is a good thing to remember, because the acquittal can often happen like almost up to 12 months after the event, and it can be a challenge to be scrolling down the Facebook page looking for your post afterwards. So just if you remember to make a copy of the link, it's helped to keep that in like a draft email or something that you can refer back to when the acquittal time comes. Just in terms of promotion, one of the aspects of when you get your funding is that you need to acknowledge your funding bodies, and it's a small statement that acknowledges the support of Western Riverina Arts, Create New South Wales through funding from the New South Wales Government. They'll provide the detail for you along with some logos. Having a look at that information when it arises and seeing what your obligations are once you're developing the project is a good step. There's like I said, there's a wide range of activities that can be included, and the public outcome aspect to it is really probably at the forefront. Making sure that it is accessible to as wide a part of the local audience as possible. There's a variety of considerations there in terms of how you ensure that you can get an audience, but also that like people who might be interested are able to attend. And I think the sort of that feeds into the development of the project as much as down the track when you're promoting it and then also acquitting it. I think one of the things that's really interesting with the CASP grant, as I mentioned, the accessibility of it is really great, but it is a a bit of a challenge for Western Riverina Arts as they are administering the grant to be able to provide as much assistance as you might need to develop your application. So there are a number of resources around that can assist with that. You'll often find that organisations like NAB will have like some guidelines about sort of applying for grants, and they also offer some guidelines in terms of what payment schedules should look like, what charges should look like. And it's a really useful thing to look over as you're preparing your budget and getting a sense of what considerations you might want to include when you're developing the application. As I mentioned, like the grant is really accessible, and I think Western Riverina Arts' administration of it really helps with that, because you know, it's right here in the region and very easy to access in terms of asking quick questions. But it's also there once you start the application. It says, have you spoken with the Regional Arts Board about your project? And it doesn't have to be too formal a process. Usually I found making a phone call or putting in an email that this is what I'm thinking about doing is a great way just to get that ball rolling, and also ensures that you've got some record. Not that any questions ever arisen in my mind about where that comes along, but it is a question on the form. So being able to demonstrate that that process was done is a good step. I might see if there's any questions. Feel free to put them in the chat, and we can address them as we go. But in the meantime, I'll just have a quick glance over a previous application that I brought along to share with people, because I think that one of the things that I really learned as from sitting on assessment panels is the opportunity to look at previous applications really gives you a sense of the tone that you might want to use in writing it, but also it gives you the clarity that it's really not such a difficult process. It looks a bit daunting at first. The application used to be a lot bigger than it currently is. It's really a benefit that it's become a more concise document, because yeah, it was getting up to like almost 24 pages at one point, and these days it's come down to just over a dozen, and a lot of that information is really just prompts to help you think about what you might want to consider in filling it out, rather than things you have to address. One of the challenges, as I mentioned, in terms of balancing a budget is that it asks you to show that it arrives at zero. And sometimes going back and trying to figure out how to reach that point is where you do feel like you've got to start pulling out your hair. I could make a joke now that about doing an application myself, but I haven't been, because this is why I'm sharing my skills. I'm not in the pool this year competing with anyone. And so the aspect of like just looking over the document and seeing how to apply it is really good. You'll see that there's questions about how you're applying, and there's scope there for local government authorities, which are your councils. You'll often find your councils will also an application. In the past, I've worked with both Narrandera, Leeton and Griffith councils, and it's really the only difference, I guess, is that they're not so interested in the auspicing fee, but they do collect money for GST. So you end up with a budget that looks a little bit different than what you applied for, but it's not a great thing to have to worry about it once you get to it. Just looking over my application, as I mentioned, it does ask for applicants' ABN, and that's where your auspicing body will provide that information along with the public liability certificate. It's pretty easy to Google ABNs if you're stuck. Not so easy to Google public liability insurance certificates without being caught out for fraud, so don't try that one at home. The project title, it's always nice to have a nice snappy title, because you find that down the track when you go to promote it, it really helps make it a bit more memorable for people. In my case, I worked with the popular movie Night at the Museum for a project I ran the year before last, which was working with a No, it was 2024 that it would have been. No, it was a project at the Pioneer Park Museum showcasing digital art. And the public outcome aspect of that was the event, but also a workshop leading into the event that helped illuminate the skills involved of the artist, unintended, that demonstrated the potential for a nighttime event at the museum. I believe it was the first one in decades. But also, given the way that the New South Wales government now has a minister for the nighttime economy, I felt like it really showed some potential for growth in the region, which, you know, is looking to increase overnight visitation. So sometimes, you know, those type of aspects are really good things to consider in your projects, because it starts to become a broader win-win situation, particularly in this day and age when there's often a bit of sniping in community groups on social media. I think about it with this project because there was a question that popped up about whether it was appropriate for Griffith to be spending money at a time when they were tightening their belt, so to speak, budgetarily wise. And we were able to sort of address that and say that this fund, you know, was specific for the project, which is one of those things that isn't often understood in communities and peers. But it also showed all those other benefits, like I said, in terms of showing a new audience for the museum, a new scope for overnight visitation, and a lot of other benefits in terms of introducing skills in working with digital media. I've been quite interested in the scope for that for digital media, because often these skills are things that you kind of think are kind of creative and a little bit clever at the time, but you find applications for them as time progresses. You know, it's a bit like, you know, when you first start getting introduced to those different apps like Canva and things, you think, oh, you know, I need to use it for this event. And next thing you know, you're using it to make a birthday card for your mum. So it's always great to see that in the arts, the benefits that flow on from having workshops and showing the opportunities for people to learn new skills. And it really helps, like, you know, level up the whole region and community once they start getting better access to community and the technology involved. So I've been quite passionate about that idea of building digital capacity for a number of years now. I'm just looking at my budget, and it was a pretty straightforward event, like in terms of paying for the venue, paying the artists involved. And that's actually probably a really key consideration when you're preparing your budget. You know, CASP really wants to support community arts projects, and that means supporting community artists. So, you know, showing that you're putting the money into the community, I think, is actually one of the key objectives of a grant like CASP, because, as I said, there's a huge range of benefits that flow on from a wide-ranging appeal of an activity in the arts. And it really helps elevate so many activities and bring people together. You know, in this day and age, that opportunity for people to socialise is a huge buzz, but also, you know, it generates so much goodwill. And I think, you know, working in the arts, that's a big part of what our objective is to help communities in so many ways. And often that's as simple as just creating a venue where people will come together. So I would like to really encourage people to look at the CASP grants, because there are so many benefits that have arisen through my experience in those projects, but also reaching out to the broader community. And I'm grateful to see a question here about the support material, because there is there is a scope in the documentation to show previous projects, but also the experience of those involved. It's a lot less formal than having to attach a CV these days. It can be just a series of dot points about previous activities they've been involved in, or prizes they've won. And also, in terms of documentation, you can attach, you know, user articles that help sort of demonstrate previous projects and legitimize your own practices. But also, that can be as simple these days as putting up links to videos elsewhere, and that sort of you know, there's a range of way of showing documentation, whether it's written, photographs, videos. If you want to go down a more formal approach, then you might even develop a survey leading into the event to show that there was a significant amount of interest, or after the event to show what people thought of the event and how you're going to take that on board in terms of your own sort of future projects. In terms of approaching an auspicing body, I think the key tip is to recognise that the role that the community group you're approaching plays in the region. A bit of fan mail goes a long way. I mean, you don't have to be totally overt in terms of your flattery, but I think, you know, acknowledging the role of the community group and seeing the win-win opportunities that your proposal provides beyond, like as mentioned, the small auspicing fee that may or may not be something they're interested in. A lot of people are really appreciative of any kind of recognition, and the same goes for community groups that are out there, you know, often doing their thing without a lot of acknowledgement. And so just that simple process of reaching out and seeing what they do and saying that you appreciate it is such a fundamental step to opening that conversation. And, you know, don't leave it till the last minute. That's often one of the other challenges when you reach out to the community groups. They'll say, we need to take this to the board. We need to take this to a meeting. So allow it in time, you know, ideally a bit more than a month, so that you can make sure you work within, you know, their own processes and routines. Have you got any questions on this?
Yes, would you be able to go through the criteria and outcomes through your experience?
Criteria is interesting because the arts cover such a broad range of activities, and I think where it becomes the key criterion, the criterion is the community side of it, like demonstrating that there is a community for your activity, or your activity is something for the community. I feel is the fundamental aspect of applying for CASP. It's often a thing where you say, I feel that there would be an audience for a thing, and being able to demonstrate it just elevates the application so much more. And in terms of those other processes, in terms of developing the application, yeah, as you look through the application, it does kind of, as I mentioned, you've got to articulate what it is in a clear way for the assessor. Show that the people involved have the skills to bring it to life and to make it happen. And then also in terms of that flowing into the budget and showing that you're actually asking for a realistic amount of money, as well as being able to, like I said, pay for the artists involved, and even recognising the other forms of support, like, you know, it might be the venue hire. The application I pointed to had the hire of Mile Park Hall at Pioneer Park Museum for the workshops, and the grounds in which the event was going to happen. And that also works in a kind of like inverted way in terms of being able to show an in-kind support. So if the community group are saying, we'll include this in our newsletter, you might recognise that the newsletter reaches, you know, an audience of whatever their mailing list is, and you might consider that from there you could expect that one other person might read it, or that they might get it mentioned to them. So being able to show that you've got that support from the community group, and it contributes to the budget because it's part of this in-kind support. And likewise, if that community group says, oh, Butte, we'll have this opportunity to set up a sausage sizzle at your event, or offer soup if you're vegans, then you've got that scope of saying we've got this in-kind support that'll happen there, and it will also generate a small income for the group, for the event. I think about the Pioneer Park Museum example, we asked for a gold coin donation for entry, and those funds were then donated to Pioneer Park Museum. And we also offered some soup for people on the night. And again, that was a great sort of opportunity for the auspicing organisation to generate a smaller amount of income to support our ongoing costs. These all contribute to the acquittal, but also they flow on to just helping the assessors understand what you're hoping to achieve.
If you're an individual, if you can go through the eligibility of who can apply,
Yep.
and where you stand as an individual. I know you have explained the auspice side.
Yep.
But and yeah, so you can explain that. Who can apply?
Yeah. Yeah, look, one of the initial questions about who can apply is there, like I said, about whether you're a local government authority. That includes councils, but I assume includes a range of other potential bodies. And the other one is like whether you're a not-for-profit organisation, a group, collective, and it says with a nominated funds administrator. And I think that's where the auspicer would be the key thing. There is also an option for other, but one of the like I said, the key hurdle for applying for CASP is incorporation or some other type of statutory recognition. Ironically, incorporation for a group gives a group the rights of an individual, but I think this is a really small hurdle, but one that helps assessors see the legitimacy of the proposal. It's rather formal, and it used to frustrate me, but after a while I realised that once I reached out to community groups, I saw all these ongoing benefits in terms of ongoing partnerships, having an audience beyond like the one that I'd created or being able to access. And so it was actually, it opened my mind to a range of other benefits. And as I mentioned with the project that I did with the Leeton Community Op Shop, it's led to an ongoing partnerships for other activities. We've done other CAS projects and also just exhibitions and activities as a result. And it's interesting once you sort of start making those connections with your community, what kind of arises, because it's really, like I said, really beneficial to like broaden out into who you work with and to learn about the landscape, so to speak, that you work in. There's a question here about the time frame for expending the grant if it's successful. And it does kind of state that it's really got to happen within a time frame that is pretty much the year ahead of when the grant closes. This one was CASP 2023, and as mentioned, it was for that event that happened in 2024. And that event, it's as you go through the form, there is a question about the time frame of the event, when it will start, when it will close. For this particular project, I knew that there would be some planning early on after daylight saving ended because of it being a nighttime event. And that was, say, in April when the artists first met at the museum and walked around and started to plan what their contributions to the event would look like. And then the outcome was like, again, later in the year as the weather started to warm before daylight saving returned. So that the scope was like about 6 months, but that stayed in there. And in terms of expending the grant, it does usually sort of assume that you're going to work within, like I said, the following year. There is a lot of flexibility in the how you run your activity, because I think this is one of the aspects that's worth also considering is that there's always the curveballs, the surprising events that happen, and we all live busy lives, so things crop up. But there's a lot of flexibility in terms of recognising that the scope of the project might change, the aims, the outcomes, and having that conversation with your regional arts board about those as they arise is the best approach. And just keep them informed about what you're doing. For me, I like to do it via an email because it means that people can read it when they're ready, but also you've got your own record to show that you acknowledge that the project that you'd hope to achieve, next July is actually going to have to happen next September, or as an example. The acquittal, similarly, there's a deadline that's quite, good and realistic to work to in terms of it being like the following March or so. And that gives you a lot of time to ensure that you can do the documentation, which it's a similar sort of outcome to the actual application in terms of showing that you did what you set out to do, or that you acknowledge where what you set out to do had to change. And there's a nice bit of reflection in it too, in terms of recognizing what you've learned from the process and how you might run things differently in the future, or some of those unexpected benefits that arose from it as well. All of these things are really useful. Maybe you don't see it initially, but down the track, you'll find that demonstrating that you've run a number of projects is great for when you do apply again next time to show your experience. And you can point to, as I said, the documentation that you collect and save away in that draft email to refer to in the future. It's a really good thing to start building up that sort of, it used to be a news clipping folder, but these days I think it could be a virtual thing, like draft email where you can draw on where, your photos or reviews, or even like the testimonials that you can collect if you ask people for what they thought. Those type of materials are really useful as your arts practice develops. Any other questions? Maybe you, sir?
Yes,
yeah, the amount of funds is been about $3,000 for a number of years now. Some of the other regional arts boards have offered a bit more, some a bit less, and I think it really does help keep the focus on what the grant is hoping to achieve, and that is something local. It might be the opportunity to bring someone into the region. It might be the opportunity just to fly your flag in terms of what you're doing. It might be developing that recognition for the work that you've already done. And there's a question here about promoting your project and how this might help to ensure the project's success. Promotion is, as I mentioned, an increasing challenge in this day and age as we're losing local media. And I think, where the audience is, whether it's on your I live in, Narendra pages. There's a big following there. It's a great starting point. And it's interesting to see that those sorts of pages are often followed by the broader media. ABC Riverina, for example, in various projects that I've been involved in, will say, hey, we saw this on this Facebook post. Do you want to talk about it? And again, those type of opportunities are a great starting point to reach a much broader audience who might be interested from around our region. And they also have a good Free Kick Friday segment. It's worth considering, where you can phone in and talk to a project before it's about to happen. I think one of the key things from my background working in marketing is that you can't put your eggs all in one basket in terms of promotion. You have to recognise that there is a number of ways that people get information. Like when Narendra Shire Council have their own sort of newsletter that's also on their Facebook page, that's also emailed out, that's also like picked up by Spirit FM. And so those, you kind of recognise that there's a variety of ways that the message is relayed out to the community, but also it becomes a thing where in advertising, you can't just have like one reference to a thing. You need to ensure that your customer encounters it. I think they work to about 3 or 4 different times to really get to that point of it being lodged in somebody's, planning for the weekend, maybe even put up on the calendar or on the fridge. there's a great scope in terms of like what you might want to do in terms of having a paper-based outcome that goes to the Visitor Information Centre, another great resource for spreading news to people in the community, particularly those coming from outside. But also, you know, the public libraries have usually a spot or a message board where you might want to put something up, and let the librarians and staff know what you're hoping to achieve while you're there. The other thing, of course, is to make sure that you include something of a call to action, as they say, where you let people know that there needs to be a certain amount of interest by a certain amount of time, and now's the time to act on it. There's different marketing ideas in terms of an early bird type of a application where you might want to get that show of interest before it happens. Or you might just want to pick up your phone and make a quick video where you say what you're planning to do and encouraging people to come along and do it. Because one of the great things about like community-based engagement is that the community are aware of each other. And so often they'll say, hey, I know that guy, what's he doing? And they want to check out a bit more about what's happening in their community. So keep it really personal. And also, don't be afraid of asking the people you know for their support. Say, this is the activity I'm running. It'd be really great to have you involved. The invitation goes a long way in this day and age where there's so many competing interests. So, you know, you can range from the really personal thing about reaching out to the people you know to the more broadcast sense of like it being, you know, a rather, you know, big message across those different media to reach. And I think it really is about having a variety of approaches to meet, like I said, those 3 or 4 ways of reaching to the community and making the individual feel like they want to attend. I encourage you to have a look at the form on the Western Riverina Arts site and get a sense of what you need to address. It's always great to read over these things in advance and give them a little bit of time to simmer and settle and to see what sort of, you know, resonances or occur and how the stars align. I think there's a lot of opportunities in CASP. I really think that it's one of the most accessible grants in our region, and it closes on Monday, the 27th of October. So yeah, from September to most of October there to get your applications in. And yeah, CASP, once you get over that little hurdle about ensuring that you've got the incorporated association and the public liability certificate, it runs pretty smoothly. And you know, budgets aren't a challenge if you keep them simple. Make sure that you're able to articulate in very simple terms what you're going to provide, and identifying what the benefits for the community are. So that benefit for the community, as I said, can be addressing the fact that, you know, we're a lower socioeconomic area that needs that opportunity to develop the capacity in the region is the really low end of it. The other thing is to approach people for the letters of support that you can include in your application that show the community you also want to see your activity. And letters of support, as I said, people are time poor. Often I find that it's really useful just to draft a short idea of what you're hoping to achieve. And it is as simple as to whom it may concern. You know, Jason's approached me about running an outcome at our organisation supporting, and I see benefit in this. It doesn't have to include a lot, but obviously the more persuasive it is and the more it recognises the experience that you bring to the project or the opportunities for the community to get involved, the more persuasive it is for the assessor. And the other thing, as I mentioned, is about that opportunity to include your own experience. There's the little spot to put those personnel involved in their previous experience and projects that they're bringing to this one, but also the clippings and the documentation that shows previous outcomes that are persuasive in showing that you've got the capacity to deliver on what you've proposed. And yeah, everybody has to start somewhere. So don't be feeling like you've never done this before and it's going to be a challenge to show people that you can do what you're hoping to do. You know, look up on the rates on NAVA and show that you're a person who might be, coming to the workshops with this much experience and see what they would be charging. I think you'd be surprised to see what a realistic budget looks like. And then there's things like travel and also like the auspicing fee, which might be 10 to 15% of the budget, which helps your organisation that you're working with continue on in future. All of these things are really feeding into the community. And that's one of the key objectives of CASP, is to build the community. So I'm looking forward to seeing what arts activities are going to roll out in 2026.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason Richardson. CASP grants are open now and they close Monday, the 27th of October. We encourage you to apply, and you are able to contact us at Western Riverina Arts, myself 0428 882 059, and email rado@westrivararts.com.au to make your inquiry before you finalise your application. We administer the grants, so we can't give letters of support, but we can certainly assist with any questions you have on those grants. Thank you very much for coming, and we will see you on the applications.